What if I told you that reality itself is malfunctioning, and thousands of people are experiencing glitches in the fabric of existence right now? Imagine walking through your neighborhood when suddenly everything feels wrong. The colors seem muted, sounds become distant, and you notice details that shouldn't exist. A street that ends in a dead end now continues for blocks. A building you've passed daily for years has completely different architecture. Your mind races, trying to rationalize what you're seeing, but deep down you know something fundamental has shifted. This isn't déjà vu. This isn't a memory lapse. This is what researchers are calling a reality failure. And if you've ever felt like you've stepped into a parallel version of your life, even for just a moment, you're not alone. You are absolutely not alone. Over 40,000 people have reported experiencing what can only be described as glitches in reality during the past decade alone. These aren't isolated incidents from unreliable witnesses. These are documented cases from teachers, doctors, engineers, and everyday people who suddenly find themselves questioning the very nature of existence. The symptoms are always eerily similar. First comes the disorientation. A feeling like you've been dropped into a movie set of your own life where everything looks almost right, but something crucial is off. Your heart starts racing as you notice inconsistencies that your brain can't process. The convenience store that was blue yesterday is now green. The stop sign at the corner has moved 20 feet to the left. Your neighbor's dog, which died last month, is running around their yard as if nothing happened. The sensory details are what make these experiences so disturbing. People consistently report that during these episodes, colors appear either too vivid or completely washed out. Sounds become either unnaturally sharp or strangely muffled, as if they're hearing them through water. Many describe feeling like they're moving through thick air, with every step requiring more effort than it should. Time itself seems to behave strangely, with seconds feeling like minutes or hours passing in what feels like moments. Most unsettling of all is the profound sense of wrongness that permeates everything, a bone-deep certainty that they've somehow slipped into a version of reality that isn't quite their own. Let me share some cases that will make your skin crawl. Liverpool, England, July 2019. Sarah Matthews, a 34-year-old accountant, experienced what she initially thought was the worst case of confusion in her life. She was walking her usual route to work when she noticed her office building, a modern glass structure she'd entered daily for 6 years, had been replaced by a Victorian-era brick building. Not renovated or partially demolished, completely replaced. The building even had different businesses inside, with old-fashioned signs and architecture that looked like it belonged in the 1800s. Sarah stood frozen on the sidewalk for nearly 10 minutes, watching people in period clothing enter and exit the building as if this was completely normal. When she finally worked up the courage to approach, she blinked, and suddenly her familiar glass office building was back. The Victorian building was gone as if it had never existed. Sarah spent the next 3 hours sitting in her car, afraid to trust her own perception. Portland, Oregon, September 2020. Michael Chen, a software engineer, was driving to pick up his daughter from school when he took his regular route through a residential neighborhood he'd traveled hundreds of times. Halfway through, he realized he was driving through a forest. Not a neighborhood with lots of trees. An actual dense forest with towering pine trees and no houses anywhere. The road was the same asphalt, with the same lane markings, but it was now winding through wilderness that couldn't possibly exist in the middle of Portland. Michael pulled over, his hands shaking as he tried to call his wife, but his phone had no signal. He sat there for 5 minutes, watching deer cross the road in front of him, before the forest suddenly flickered like a broken television screen. In an instant, he was back in the familiar neighborhood, surrounded by houses and mailboxes. His daughter was waiting at school, annoyed that he was 10 minutes late, but according to his car's clock, only 2 minutes had passed since he left home. But perhaps the most chilling case comes from Toledo, Ohio, in March 2021. Jennifer Walsh, a high school history teacher, was shopping at her local grocery store when she noticed that none of the employees or customers looked quite right. Their faces seemed subtly wrong, as if someone had tried to recreate human features from memory but missed crucial details. Their eyes were too large, their smiles too wide, their movements too fluid. The store itself was exactly as she remembered it, but the people felt like uncanny valley versions of human beings. Jennifer tried to interact with a cashier, asking about the price of milk, but the cashier responded in words that sounded like English, but made no sense when put together. The circular movement of Tuesday's elephant requires 17 purple emotions, the cashier said with that too wide smile. Jennifer ran from the store and didn't return for weeks. When she finally did, everything was normal, but she still can't shake the memory of those almost human faces. Now pause for a moment and think about your own life. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like the furniture was arranged differently, even though no one had moved anything? Have you ever been driving and suddenly found yourself on a road you didn't recognize, even though you never turned? Have you ever looked at someone you know well and felt for just a split second like they were a stranger wearing a familiar face? These moments of reality dysfunction are more common than most people admit. We dismiss them as tiredness, stress, or simple mistakes, but what if there's something much more significant? The scientific community has several explanations for these phenomena, though none of them fully account for the consistency and specificity of the reports. Sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations and disorientation, but these experiences often happen to well-rested individuals in broad daylight. Memory consolidation errors can make us remember things differently than they actually occurred, but that doesn't explain cases where people experience changes in real time, while they're actively observing their environment. Psychological stress can certainly alter perception, but many of these incidents occur during routine, non-stressful activities like walking to work or grocery shopping. The more intriguing explanations venture into the realm of theoretical physics. Some researchers suggest these could be glimpses into parallel universes, moments when the barriers between different versions of reality become thin enough for us to perceive alternate timelines. Quantum mechanics tells us that every decision creates a branching point where reality splits into multiple possibilities. Perhaps what we're calling reality glitches are actually brief crossovers between these parallel worlds, where we temporarily experience a version of our lives where different choices were made. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics proposes that every quantum measurement creates a split in reality, generating infinite parallel universes where every possible outcome occurs simultaneously. In one universe, you chose coffee instead of tea this morning. In another, you took a different route to work. In yet another, that building in your neighborhood was constructed in a completely different architectural style. If the boundaries between these realities are not as solid as we assume, it's possible that consciousness could occasionally slip between them, creating these moments of profound disorientation and wrongness. Another possibility lies in simulation theory, the hypothesis that our entire reality is actually a computer simulation run by some advanced civilization. If this is true, then glitches in the matrix would be literal glitches, programming errors or memory conflicts in the system running our simulated world. This would explain why these experiences often have a digital quality to them, with reality flickering, changing suddenly, or displaying impossible combinations of elements, much like a video game with corrupted data files. The concept of consciousness itself, playing a role in shaping reality, opens up even more disturbing possibilities. If consciousness and reality are more intertwined than we understand, then perhaps strong emotions, stress, or certain mental states can actually cause temporary tears in the fabric of existence. Maybe our minds are not just observers of reality, but active participants in its construction, and during moments of psychological vulnerability, we accidentally access the underlying code that holds everything together. Time slip experiences, where people claim to have temporarily traveled to different time periods, represent an even more extreme version of reality dysfunction. The most famous documented case occurred in 1901 when two highly educated British academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, visited the Palace of Versailles in France. On August 10th, while exploring the gardens around Petit Trianon, both women reported entering what they could only describe as a living historical tableau. They encountered people dressed in 18th-century clothing who appeared to be going about daily activities as if it were still the 1700s. The women saw a lady sketching near a cottage, whom they later became convinced was Marie Antoinette herself. They observed gardeners, guards, and nobility, all behaving as if the French Revolution had never occurred. What makes this case particularly compelling is that Moberly and Jourdain were serious academics with reputations to protect. They spent 10 years researching their experience before publishing their account in 1911, comparing historical records with what they had observed. Many of the people they described matched historical accounts of individuals who had lived at Versailles in the 1780s. The clothing, architecture, and even the landscape they saw corresponded to how the location would have appeared before the Revolutionary period, when many buildings were demolished or modified. Throughout history, cultures around the world have recognized the existence of thin places, locations where the normal rules of reality don't quite apply. The ancient Celts called them thin places, where the veil between worlds was gossamer light. Aboriginal Australians speak of song lines, paths across the land that exist in both the physical world and the dream time. Japanese folklore describes places where time flows differently, where a person might spend what feels like hours but return to find only minutes have passed, or worse, discover that decades have gone by in the outside world. Native American traditions include numerous accounts of people stepping into what they call time pockets, or spirit time, where they encounter ancestors or experience visions of the past or future. These stories, passed down through generations, describe symptoms remarkably similar to modern reports of reality glitches, disorientation, changed landscapes, encounters with people who shouldn't exist, and the profound sense that the normal flow of time has been disrupted. Even medieval European records contain accounts of people who claimed to have slipped through time. The Irish legends of the other world describe places where mortals could accidentally wander into timeless realms, spending what they perceived as a single night but returning to find that years or even centuries had passed in the mortal world. These weren't dismissed as mere folklore by the people who recorded them. They were documented as actual experiences that required explanation and caution. The consistency of these reports across different cultures and time periods suggests that reality glitches might not be a modern phenomenon at all. Perhaps they've always been occurring, but in our current technological age, we have more ways to document and share these experiences. Social media platforms and online forums have created spaces where people can report these incidents without fear of being immediately dismissed as delusional. This has revealed that reality dysfunction might be far more common than anyone previously realized. What's emerging from all these accounts is a picture of reality that's far less stable than we've been taught to believe. The solid, predictable world we think we inhabit might actually be more like a probability field, where different versions of events coexist until consciousness collapses them into a single experienced timeline. When that system malfunctions, we get glimpses of the other possibilities, the roads not taken, the choices that led to different outcomes. Consider the implications if this is true. Every moment of déjà vu might be a brief contact with a parallel timeline. Every time you could have sworn you put your keys in one place but found them somewhere else, you might have accessed a reality where you made a different choice. Every instance of walking into a room and forgetting why you went there could be your consciousness briefly syncing with a version of yourself who had a different intention. The technology we use daily might be making these experiences more frequent. Our phones, computers, and GPS systems create electromagnetic fields that could potentially interfere with the quantum processes that maintain reality's stability. Some researchers theorize that the increase in reality glitch reports correlates with the proliferation of wireless technology and high-frequency electromagnetic radiation in our environment. But here's what's really terrifying. If reality is as malleable as these experiences suggest, then consciousness itself might be far more powerful and dangerous than we realize. Perhaps the reason most people don't experience obvious reality glitches is that their minds have built-in safeguards, filters that prevent them from seeing the true malleable nature of existence. Maybe those who do experience these phenomena have minds that are either more sensitive or have somehow bypassed these protective mechanisms. The question that haunts every researcher who studies this phenomenon is whether reality glitches are increasing in frequency or whether we're simply becoming more aware of them. Are we living through a period where the boundaries between possible worlds are becoming more permeable? Or have we always been surrounded by these tiers in reality, only now developing the courage and vocabulary to acknowledge them? What's absolutely certain is that thousands of rational, educated people are reporting experiences that challenge our most basic assumptions about the nature of reality. These aren't ancient myths or folklore. These are contemporary accounts from people living in our modern scientific world, people who have everything to lose and nothing to gain by sharing stories that make them sound delusional. The medical and psychological explanations, while plausible for individual cases, fall apart when applied to the sheer volume and consistency of reports. Stress, fatigue, and memory errors don't account for multiple witnesses experiencing the same impossible events simultaneously. They don't explain why these experiences often occur during routine activities when people are alert and functioning normally. Most importantly, they don't address why these glitches often involve impossible combinations of elements that couldn't exist in any normal psychological state. If we accept that reality might not be as solid as we believe, then we're forced to confront some disturbing questions. How many of our memories are from this timeline versus others we've briefly accessed? How do we know that the version of reality we're experiencing right now is the correct one? If consciousness can slip between parallel worlds, what happens to our sense of identity and continuity when we discover that our past might not be as fixed as we thought? The implications extend beyond individual experience into questions about the nature of truth itself. If reality is constantly shifting and branching, then objective truth becomes a moving target. The facts we base our decisions on, the histories we learn, the scientific laws we discover, might all be specific to this particular version of reality. In another timeline, the laws of physics might work differently. In another branch of possibility, historical events might have unfolded in completely different ways. This brings us to perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all. What if reality glitches aren't accidents or malfunctions, but signs that someone or something is actively manipulating the structure of existence? If our reality is a simulation, then perhaps these glitches are evidence of updates, modifications, or interventions by whoever or whatever is running the program. If parallel worlds exist, maybe these crossovers aren't random but are being orchestrated by entities that exist outside our normal dimensional boundaries. Some researchers have noted that reality glitches often seem to cluster around significant events or decisions in people's lives. They occur more frequently during periods of transition, stress, or major life changes. This could suggest that consciousness itself becomes more fluid and reality more malleable when we're psychologically vulnerable or in states of high emotional intensity. The technology angle becomes even more intriguing when we consider that many of these experiences involve elements that seem almost digital in nature. People report reality flickering like a faulty screen, changes occurring in discrete jumps rather than smooth transitions, and environments that seem to load incorrectly like corrupted computer files. If we are living in a simulation, then these would be exactly the kinds of glitches we might expect to see when the system is overloaded or experiencing technical problems. But even if we reject the simulation hypothesis, the quantum mechanical explanations remain deeply unsettling. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles exist in superposition, occupying all possible states simultaneously until observed. Perhaps consciousness itself exists in a similar superposition, experiencing all possible timelines simultaneously until something causes it to collapse into awareness of just one version of reality. Reality glitches might be moments when that collapse process fails, allowing us to perceive multiple timelines at once. The historical and cultural consistency of these reports across time and geography suggests that whatever is causing these experiences is fundamental to the human condition, rather than a product of modern stress or technology. Ancient peoples didn't have electromagnetic interference from cell towers, but they still reported experiences of slipping through time and encountering impossible realities. This implies that the phenomenon is rooted in something much deeper than our current lifestyle or environment. What makes these accounts even more credible is that they often include details that witnesses couldn't have known beforehand. In time-slip cases, people frequently report seeing historical elements that are later verified through research. In reality glitch cases, multiple witnesses often report the same impossible changes, ruling out individual hallucination or memory error. These details suggest that something real is happening, even if we don't understand what it is or why it occurs. The psychological impact on those who experience these phenomena is profound and consistent. Almost everyone reports a lasting sense of uncertainty about the nature of reality. They become more observant of their surroundings, constantly checking for signs that something has changed. Many develop a kind of existential anxiety, wondering if their memories are reliable and whether the world they're experiencing is the same one they've always lived in. This psychological aftermath might be the most important clue to understanding what's really happening. If these were simple hallucinations or memory errors, the emotional impact would likely fade as people rationalize the experience. Instead, witnesses often report that these events fundamentally changed their worldview, making them question assumptions they had never examined before. This suggests that whatever they experienced was significant enough to override their brain's natural tendency to normalize and forget anomalous events. The clustering of reports in certain geographical areas has led some researchers to propose that reality might be more stable in some locations than others. Certain places seem to be hotspots for these experiences, with multiple unconnected individuals reporting similar phenomena in the same areas over periods of years or decades. This could indicate that the fabric of reality itself has weak points or stress fractures that make certain locations more prone to these kinds of distortions. Scientists studying consciousness and quantum mechanics are beginning to propose models that could account for these experiences without requiring us to abandon rational inquiry. Some suggest that consciousness might be quantum mechanical in nature, allowing it to exist in superposition states where it can access information from multiple parallel realities simultaneously. Under normal circumstances, decoherence processes would collapse this superposition into awareness of a single timeline. But certain conditions might delay or prevent this collapse, resulting in mixed perceptions from different realities. Others propose that space-time itself might not be as smooth and continuous as we assume. Just as matter and energy are quantized at the smallest scales, perhaps time and space are also made up of discrete units. If so, then the boundaries between these quantum units of reality might occasionally allow information to leak between them, creating the perception of glitches or slips between different versions of the same events. The role of expectation and belief in these experiences cannot be ignored, but it might not work in the way skeptics assume. Rather than creating false experiences, belief and expectation might actually make individuals more sensitive to detecting real anomalies in reality's structure. People who are convinced that reality is solid and unchanging might unconsciously filter out or rationalize away experiences that don't fit their worldview, while those who are open to the possibility of reality dysfunction might be more likely to notice and remember when such events occur. What's becoming clear from all of this research is that reality might be far stranger and more fragile than our daily experience suggests. The solid, predictable world we think we inhabit could be just one layer of a much more complex and dynamic system where multiple possibilities exist simultaneously, separated by boundaries that are not always impermeable. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering about your own experiences. Have you ever felt like you've stepped sideways into a slightly different version of your life? Have you ever noticed changes in your environment that you couldn't explain? Have you ever felt that profound sense of wrongness that makes you question whether you're still in the same reality you woke up in? You're not alone, and you're not crazy. Thousands of people are reporting these experiences, and the number is growing every year. We're living in a time when the boundaries between possible worlds might be becoming more permeable, or when we're finally developing the courage to acknowledge experiences that have always been part of the human condition, but were too disturbing to discuss openly. The scientific investigation of these phenomena is still in its infancy, but the implications are staggering. If reality is as malleable as these reports suggest, then everything we think we know about consciousness, time, space, and identity needs to be reconsidered. We might be on the verge of discovering that the universe is far stranger, more complex, and more responsive to consciousness than we ever imagined. I want to hear from you. Have you experienced moments where reality seemed to glitch or malfunction? Have you ever felt like you've briefly slipped into a parallel version of your life? Share your stories in the comments below. Every account helps us build a more complete picture of what might be one of the most important phenomena of our time. Don't hold back the details that seem too weird or impossible. Those are often the most important parts. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're just beginning to explore the deepest mysteries of reality and consciousness. In our next video, we'll be investigating cases where people claim to have not just observed reality glitches, but to have caused them through focused intention or extreme emotional states. The boundary between mind and matter might be far thinner than we ever suspected. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. Keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and remember that reality might be far more flexible than you ever imagined. Until next time, stay curious and question everything you think you know about the world around you.